How you
We're ready.
how you doing?
I'm fantastic.
You're not. You're lying. You're just as exhausted as I am. Traveling
Okay,
here for 3 days.
I'm running on a few coffees and about 4 hours of sleep, but that's all part of the fun.
It is like I get this cool. The Fitbit's a cool deal, but it's told me I've had 7 hours of sleep since Sunday.
Yeah, I'm not wearing mine.
Let's
I don't need a reminder of how little sleep we've had.
let's move on. Um, we just spent quite a bit of time listening to some of the great in the past and current things that are happening in Alberta regarding clean technologies, the future of gas. But I'd like to go a little, like, although we did talk about things that are traveling at several hundred miles above the Earth too. But I want to kind of go to a high level. And while we're at COP here, I'd like to ask you if you could share a bit about what you want Alberta's story to be. And when we discuss emissions reduction and responsible energy development, what do you want Alberta? What do you want the world to see from Alberta here at COP?
I think last year was my first COP, and I have to say one of the things that stood out for me was that we are a leader in a number of the topics that are being discussed both last year and here today when it comes to emissions reduction, but then also mitigation. And I think that there is a very real story that we have to tell when it does come to reaching our goals. Especially, we just finished our panel on methane, how we were able to hit our target of a 45% reduction 3 years ahead of schedule. We've now overshot that, and reduced methane emissions by more than 52% and counting every single day. Obviously, thanks to our partners in industry. But that we're doing it without making industry uncompetitive, because at the same time, of course, we care about emissions reduction and stewarding and conserving our environment and our beautiful landscapes for generations to come. We also know that affordable, reliable, secure energy is something that matters to everyday people, and certainly we see that in Canada. But those conversations are happening around the world. That we have to focus on both, and that's what we're doing. And that's really how Alberta's approach has been structured over the last number of years. I think it's why we are hitting our targets, but why we're also seeing increased investment by industry in these areas.
So carrying on from that, in 1980, 80% of all the terawatts of power or energy that were used came from fossil fuels. That's about the same today, like 40 years later. It's just a fact. I'm not, and energy use isn't going down as the world gets more people and more modernized. Um, a lot of work's done to find economic, sustainable, and affordable solutions to this rising energy need. Tell us how Alberta is a responsible producer of choice globally for safe, reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy, because it's true. We are.
We absolutely are. And I think you're right. Demand for energy, safe, affordable, reliable, ethically produced energy, demand is not going down. It is increasing every single day. And we in Alberta are very proud of our record on that front. And we want to be the jurisdiction of choice. We believe that if we can continue to produce more and more every single day, we've talked about doubling our energy production to meet those demands. That's a good story if we can displace less environmentally friendly or higher emissions forms of energy from other places around the world. When we talk about how we're able to do that, I think, again, it speaks to working with industry. It speaks to working with industry when we develop policies that allow industry to grow and thrive while doing the right thing for the environment. And I would point out, we just heard from Tourmaline up here a few minutes ago that they were working on methane emissions reduction before any government set a target, because they knew that it was the right thing to do for the environment. And, I think maybe the sad part about that is that we had been working on that so long before it was a topic of conversation that in many cases we didn't tell that story. We just moved on to the next thing and started identifying all the other challenges that we wanted to face and the new goals that we wanted to set. So, I am very proud of our environmental record. I think that showcasing the work that we're doing, whether it's the methane emissions testing center or the work that's being done, I see some of the oil sands operators here on land reclamation and how we prioritize environmental stewardship. I think those are very important stories to tell, but it's also on things like CCUS and geothermal, talking about how Alberta technology is now being deployed around the world to meet energy needs, and also do it in a very environmentally responsibly way.
So all the fellows on the panel earlier touched on the tier funding in the industry, money that comes from the industry. And I like Scott's reference to a carrot and a stick analogy, metaphor. Can you speak more to that though? And how are the unique leadership is developing new emissions reduction technologies in Alberta?
Yes, I can. And, one of the things that I think has been made clear, and certainly since I've been in this job, but you all heard it here this morning, is the importance of government working with industry. I think the risk sometimes is when governments come in and set targets that are unreasonable and unrealistic. It has the opposite impact on investment in emissions reduction technology. I'm very proud, and I'm looking at Ian Gates, obviously the University of Calgary. I mean, those partnerships are just as important as the ones that we have with industry, as post-secondary and our researchers. But I think even on methane, a tale of two governments, I've called it, and not that I want to be too critical, but I have to be a little bit. That if we had taken the approach on methane that our federal government had wanted us to take, which was just set a target, set a cap, and make industry adapt. We said, you know what, we think we can do this better. And we were able then to, as you've already heard, reduce our methane emissions, hit our goal 3 years ahead of schedule with a cost of $600 million less to industry, which matters from a jobs perspective. It matters from an affordability perspective. Those are the things that everyday Canadians and people around the world, they wake up, that's what matters to them right now, is cost of living, affordability, and making sure that there are the lights turn on when they flip the switch, and that we have energy to heat our homes in the winter, which it's not winter yet back home, but it sure will be soon. So these are top priorities for Canadians, and our tier structure has enabled industry to pay for this innovation and technology, as opposed to that cost being placed on everyday Albertans and Canadians, which I don't think is something that they want to see right now. And I think we're seeing that in opposition to things like carbon taxes and policies that are more structured, might I say, a little bit punitive in nature. But that's where I see some of the pushback. And so our tier system allows those heavy emitters to then have an obligation to do the right thing and have the flexibility to still remain competitive and economical, which matters if we want to compete on the global stage.
So those that know me in the room would understand that I probably shouldn't go anywhere near the federal government in this discussion. But I would like to talk about collaboration and to close out this discussion and talk about how Alberta's engaging with and collaborating with Indigenous communities and other stakeholders in its goal of continuing to reduce emissions and support responsible energy development. I think it's crucial to the discussion here, and we'll end there.
Yeah, and I would say first, I mean, I often hear our Premier Danielle Smith talk about collaboration with the federal government. There are areas where we maybe disagree on a policy perspective, but then there are areas where we do agree. I look at something like CCUS, where again, Alberta's leadership, we've safely and permanently stored 14 million tons of CO2 underground. We have a great story to tell there. Especially a lot of discussions at COP both this year and last year, listening to the challenges that other jurisdictions have when it comes to CCUS, and thinking how far ahead we really truly are in Alberta when it comes to these projects. But that's an area where the federal and provincial governments both came together to say, we value this technology, we want to invest in this technology, we have alignment there on what we want to see, and are all at the table committing to investments through different mechanisms in this area. And so, I would say that there are some areas of agreement, just not all.
Right.
And when it comes to partnering with Indigenous communities, and certainly I've met with a number of First Nations and Métis communities across Alberta, I would say our Alberta's Indigenous Opportunities Corporation is one key area where we are really showing that partnership, because I think it's important, both from an environmental perspective, to have the community communities at the table, to be raising concerns and talking about things that they are hearing from their community members, so that that perspective is shared and heard and listened to right from the outset of these projects, but then making sure that Indigenous communities are also benefiting in the success of these projects. And so I think that there is a major win there. We have a number of investments across the province that we are seeing. You know, this partnership has very much been welcomed by Indigenous communities in Alberta, and I think it's been a great model. And I know certainly we've had other provinces in Canada, the federal government looking to say, how do we maybe replicate that? How do we take what's working in Alberta, showing true economic reconciliation with Indigenous communities, and share those learnings and that model elsewhere, not just in Canada, but I think that it's a model that can be emulated around the world. And so, you know, I think that that's one area where there is a very direct and public policy and program area where we're making great strides on that front. But I do think not only does it benefit the communities themselves, but I think it actually makes the project stronger to have those voices involved right from the very beginning.
That's great, Minister. Please, round of applause for Minister Schulz. Thank you. And thank you for your service.
Well, thank you very much, Kelly.